All right. Okay, well, good morning. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. So my name is Mark Meyer. I'm here with Kevin Corwin. We are the co-founders of InScope. And here, I'll turn my video on.
Just getting ready to set.
So today this is the third webinar in our series of 4. So today we're going to talk about reality number 3 for our project-based businesses. This is a webinar specifically for engineering and architectural firms. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so reality number 3 is what the work makes must be more than what the work takes. So when we think about this, it's pretty simple. Okay, it's like buy low, sell high, and it's the reality. If you have a project-based business, an engineering firm, or an architecture firm, this at the most fundamental level has to be true. Your projects have got to make more than they cost. However, with a projects-driven business, it's not that easy. So we think about our businesses. Each business has got dozens or maybe hundreds of projects across multiple offices. Each of these projects have scopes of services. They've got phases. There may be, a dozen, there may be 3 scope elements, there may be dozens or hundreds of scope elements. For each one of those scope elements, we're applying resources and expenses. We've got sub-consultants that we're dealing with, and every project has got its own schedule, and each of those elements are tied together within the project, within the office, and within the company. So trying to make sure that your work is making more than it takes becomes a very complex web. And so how do you do it? How do you stay on track? Well, in our businesses, the project managers are the gatekeepers. So they're the ones controlling each of those individual projects. And they need to know some basic things just to make sure that their world is running forward. They need to know where they are now. So that's for all of their projects. Where are we? And we need to know where we're going on these projects. And we need to know how and if we can get there. So starting with where we are now, we use the classic question of what's my budget? Are we on budget? And you need to know that at any given point in time. The budget was your plan when the project started. So you sat down, you put together a scope, you work with your clients, you came up with a budget. And then once the project starts, you're going to start billing against it, timesheets, sub-invoices, expenses, and it's going to be what's left. So it's a classic question, where are we on budget? The other classic question is, where are we on schedule? So these are 2 things that your project managers need to know right out of the gate, and it's got to be in real time. So you don't want to know what your budget was last week, or 2 weeks ago, or a month ago, and I think this in real time is something that we really want to keep our minds on. It has to be accessible, and it's got to be easy. So I'm using, when we talk about the project management tools, of course, I'm using InScope as our example here. But if I pull up InScope, and let's say I'm a project manager, and these are my projects, okay, I want to be able to quickly see, where am I right now? So here was the budget, but here's what I've actually spent to date. Here's what's remaining, and here's my schedule. And so I can look at this, and just a flash, this is today, it's a snapshot. I can see, oh, well, shoot, look at my boat ramp project. I've only 84% through my work complete, but I've already blown my budget. I'm 100% through, and I'm only halfway through the schedule. I can look at, here's one where I'm all the way through my schedule, but I've still got work that has to be done, and I'm over budget on this. So this gives us a snapshot of where we are. Certainly answers the question, how much budget do we have left? Are we on schedule? And those are yes, no answers, but this doesn't really help you manage your world. So we want to ask the next sort of series of questions is, that's where we are, and now where are we going? So if we look at you know, when I think of where are we going, when I think of project management, I love this quote. And I use the sort of bastardized version of this quote, which is the, you know, all your plans go to hell when the first shots are fired. So we've all managed projects, and we know that, you know, that once you get out in the world and once the schedule starts and once people start working on it, everything starts to change. So we have to have some sort of a method to react to all of those changes. So that would be forecast. With the project management tool, we want to know, we know where we are today. So how are we going to get to the finished product? How are we going to get to the end on budget and on schedule? And so your forecast tool needs to let you nimbly sort of manage what your hours are or your dollars, what your schedule is. You should be able to quickly compare that to what's remaining. So when we think of these little formulas down here, your forecast could be greater than what's remaining or less than what's remaining. You know, you're forecasting that you're going to go over budget, or maybe you're going to go under budget. The same with the schedule. So, you know, let's take a look again back at InScope. If I pop open my forecast here, okay, so now I've got a little more information. It's more than just a snapshot of where I am today. This is where I think these projects are going. And so, second. So when I think about this boat ramp project here that I see is I've spent all my budget and I've still got scope left, I could say, yep, actually I am forecasting that that I'm going to be over budget on this project. You know, I look down at like this zoo project here where I'm 100% through schedule. Well, that schedule was off back then, and I'm forecasting to go over. So let's open that one up. If you look at your forecast and you think about how am I managing it, I can see, okay, well, I've got this calculations here. It's 100% done. I've got no hours left on it. But I do have, you know, 8 hours for Tim and Lorraine on an alternatives analysis. And maybe I'm down here and I think, well, you know, actually, you know, Tim's not going to spend 8 hours on that final approach. It's going to be 2 hours, and I can quickly and easily adjust that. And that gives me I'm still forecasting going over, but it's not that bad. But I also look at, oh my gosh, you know, I need more schedule. I need some more time. So I call up my client and say, I need another, let's say another 100 days. So if I go 200 days here. So now, you know, it's going to adjust the schedule. And now I've got until the middle of July to finish up my alternatives and my final approach. And that's what I mean when we're talking about a forecast. It's got to be easy. It's got to be nimble, that you can go in and day to day or week to week. You can keep adjusting and pivoting based on how your project is moving.
And I think that's really key, Mark, that ability, because a lot of systems, they tell you, of course, you know, this was my budget and I've consumed this much, and actuals, I got this much remaining. But it's really, really hard to be able to easily say, well, just because I got 50,000 remaining, is it going to take 50,000, or is it going to take 60, or is it going to take 45? And being able to change that on the fly, I think is one of the key hallmarks of the system.
Absolutely. And this is where your project managers are going to live. You know, they're going to live in forecast, because actual it's happening. Time is moving on, schedule's happening, actual is happening. You need to respond to it to make sure you're bringing your products in on scope, on budget, on schedule. So again, we're looking at the forecast. So this is the where are you going. The last piece of information is how will you get there and can you get there? And so with can you get there, that's workload. So you want to take those forecast hours. So for across all of your projects, because again, these are project-based businesses, and you're sharing your resources with all the other project managers and all the other projects. So we want to take all of those resources that are assigned to all those projects, and we want to spread them across all the schedules to see if we can actually make it. So I'm going to pull up InScope here again. So this is an example of workload. So these are the resources I have for all of my projects, and this is their workload. And again, as I modify scope schedule or as I modify my forecast or I modify my schedule, it'll automatically update the workload. So I can look and see, maybe I want to look at it weekly. So I can go in and say, I want to look at a weekly forecast and I can see, how's everybody doing week to week? Or maybe it makes more sense to me to look at it on a monthly basis. And a lot of times this is what I'm doing with my projects. I'm looking down a couple of months ahead and, I would see, okay, well, in July, Jen has got a 274-hour month, and that's just a little too much. So maybe we want to start to adjust and move our workload. And this does happen. I mean, we've had projects where we've looked, looking several months down the road, and we see, okay, everybody's scheduled this month to have a really, really heavy month, and we can immediately start. Let's get the PMs together. Let's talk about, we had a light month before. Can we move some of that workload up? We actually had a project where we couldn't, and we had to call the client and say, we're not going to make that deliverable. We're going to make it a month later, but we've adjusted everything so the final product will be on time. Interesting thing happened though, when we made the call, we were 2 months out and they thought we were rock stars because we knew what was going on 2 months from now. So, this is a very powerful tool to manage projects, certainly.
I think what's important about workloads too is that, again, where you had made those adjustments to bring the hours down, well, just because that was scheduled from whatever it was, October of last year, to you changed it to July, well, you don't want to spread those hours between October of last year and July of this year, because it doesn't do you any good to think about spreading those hours in the past. You need that workload always looking from today forward, because that's the work you have, that's the work you're forecasting to remain.
Right.
So you always want that to happen from today forward. And again, InScope is one of the only systems that does that automatically.
Right. And you can open up, see who's working on what, what's the project that's driving, there it is. It's the City 33874 project is driving this overage here. We got 200 hours on final PS&E. But absolutely, it's there was more time in that schedule, but it's applying the hours from today forward. So that's a good point. So again, with our 3 metrics, the must-haves when you're looking at project management, this is the information you have to have. We need to know the financial condition of any and all projects in real time. So this is the where are we now? Where are we? We need to know that financial trajectory. Where are we going? And we need to know whether or not we can get there. Do we have the resources? Do we got the gas to get there? Now, once you have that, suddenly you've got a tool that has massive predictive value. You're creating visibility within all of your projects, and that visibility, of course, now you've got accountability. Everybody's looking and can see the projects, and they're seeing what's going on. They're accountable for where their projects are. And the one thing that this creates, that's kind of the magic, is suddenly you're proactive. They've got the schedule event. There are several ways to be proactive, and we can talk about many of these ways. But when you think about our project-based businesses, you win the work, so you plan the work, you work out a scope and schedule and a fee with your client, and you start moving through it, and you're doing the work, and you're controlling the work, and you're forecasting, and you're bringing your projects in on time, on budget, and that helps you win more work. So again, using the systems, knowing where you are, where you're going, and can you get there, basically project management, to make sure that the work makes more than it takes, project by project.
And that driving proactivity piece of it, that's that's really the key. I mean, what you shared, but the story you shared about the contacting the client 2 months ahead of time. I mean, I can tell you, I think I've shared with most people, I'm a former city engineer, so I was more on the client side, but I can tell you, I can only remember maybe a couple of times, like less than 3 or less times, that I've ever had consultants, and I know many clients would feel the same way, that they ever have consultants reach out ahead of time and like, oh, we see a problem with our internal workload or whatever, we might need to adjust some deadlines. Can we work with you to maybe be a little later on this? Like, it just doesn't happen because again, I think most clients feel that way. Like, it's just almost unheard of to hear that from consultants. The story is typically, oh, we're out of money, and there were all these other things that we did along the way, and can we have an extra? And the proactivity can really set you apart as a consultant.
One more good point, and just to go back here, when you've got this type of visibility, there's no way scope creep lives in this world. This is where scope creep dies. So you really, even examples where, we've all had this happen where a client will say, well, we weren't really planning on doing that. And they say, well, go ahead and do it. And if you run out of money, we'll get an extra at the end. Well, just the ability to say, okay, we're just going to throw that in there as a new task, and I'm going to assign the hours to it, and people or not even assign the hours, just let people bill to it. And then, at the end, it's like, well, yep, well, we went over that. Actually, they took us $10,732.12. And it's, it exactly. And it just happened, again, in the background. It's not something that you had to manage and make a special spreadsheet for.
And again, you can forecast it early. I mean, you can forecast it early and kind of advise the client, hey, this is about what we think it'll be over.
Yep, absolutely. Right now, we're forecasting right on budget, so that we are going to have that extra at the end.
Yeah.
And so again, just having control over that, having the visibility can allow you to be so much more proactive. And so that is it. That was a short webinar for reality number 3. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, hearing none, we will be sending out information on the 4th webinar in the series. So stay tuned. I hope this was very helpful. Have a good day.
You want to stop recording?
Yeah. How do I stop recording here?